It's amazing what two countries can do when they team up to tackle a problem. That's what Ukraine and the US have been doing recently, as Ukraine's drone developers have been working with an American company to come up with an unmanned aerial vehicle, or UAV, that will deliver hell to Russia. That UAV is now ready to go, and that means Ukraine has done something few would have believed for the US military. It's helped the most advanced military in the world catch up in the one area where it was really falling behind. America's drone game just got supercharged, and it's all thanks to Ukraine. On October 16, United 24 Media reported that a new AI-powered drone named Artemis has been tested and is now approved to enter mass production. The drone was being developed by Ukraine alongside a US defense drone software and artificial intelligence company named Auterion. Together, Ukraine and the US had a clear plan: develop a long-range strike drone that's modeled on every lesson that Ukraine has learned during its war with Russia. Artemis is the result, and this UAV looks like it's going to be a game changer. That reason will be explored in a moment. First, Auterion itself has announced that the drone is ready to go in a press release that offers a few more details about what the US and Ukraine have just achieved. Auterion is partnered for the Artemis program with a Ukrainian hardware manufacturer whose name is being kept confidential for operational security reasons, the company says. Keeping the Ukrainian manufacturer private is a good move. Ukraine has been expanding its drone manufacturing base for a while, and it naturally wants to offer as little information as possible to Russia. If Vladimir Putin's forces picked up on a name, that would give the country's intelligence services some clues that could lead them to where the Ukrainian manufacturer behind Artemis is based. A strike on that manufacturer could have ended the Artemis project. So secrecy was of the utmost importance. Auterion adds that the new drone has gone through an extensive range of tests that include conducting a ground launch and navigating toward a target with the assistance of GPS. Tests have also been carried out to ensure that the drone can still fly toward a target in a GPS-denied environment. Plus, the obvious test of ensuring carrying capacity, flight length, and the ability to conduct terminal engagement have all been completed. Now, Auterion says, the testing phase is completed and the drone is preparing to enter mass production. With the Artemis program concluded, Auterion is entering the scale-up phase with the Department of War to work towards co-production at mass scale, Auterion states. The company is committed to supporting domestic US production while delivering a common software layer that ensures interoperability and continuous improvement. Pay attention to that last sentence because it's very important. Auterion is saying that this isn't any old drone that it's developed alongside Ukraine. It's a drone that's supported by a common software layer that will be used by every country that operates the Artemis. In other words, Ukraine won't be the only country that gets its hands on this new drone. The US is going to be building plenty for itself, and it's going to be able to improve on an already impressive drone over time thanks to its cooperation with Ukraine. The importance of this type of statement can't be denied. It was only in March that the relationship between Ukraine and the US had become so contentious that the US suspended all military aid to Ukraine. Back then, the level of cooperation that led to the creation of the Artemis drone would have seemed impossible. Ukraine was instead facing a future where it would have to fight against Russia without its most powerful ally by its side. Fast forward to October, and the US isn't just helping Ukraine again, it's working alongside Ukraine to develop the precise types of weapons that will do as much damage to Russia as possible. And that leads back to the Artemis drone and what it actually brings to the table for Ukraine and eventually the US. The basic specifications make the new drone seem similar to pretty much any other long-range drone the Ukraine has in its arsenal. The Artemis has a combat-proven range of 1,000 miles and it can carry an 88-pound warhead, United 24 Media reports. That's not too far away from the specifications of Ukraine's own Lyuty drone, which has been around since 2024 and has been used in Ukraine's recent long-range assaults against Russia's oil refining sector. The Lyuty has a stated range of over 620 miles and can carry a warhead weighing up to 110 pounds. Militani reported in April 2024. However, on October 3rd, the same outlet reported that a Lyuty drone had been spotted flying 869 miles deep inside Russia, with some outlets suggesting a distance closer to about 932 miles, which brings its range closer to the new Artemis. So, what's the big deal about Artemis? Ukraine already has drones that can fly comparable distances and carry even heavier warheads. The big deal isn't the drone itself, but rather the software that's used to power the drone. That's where Auterion comes into play, and the company has developed a package that may make the Artemis one of, if not the most dangerous drones in Ukraine's arsenal. That software is the Auterion Visual Navigation system, and it works thanks to the Skynode N mission computer that Auterion has developed as part of this joint project. Using that system, the Artemis is capable of navigating to and conducting a strike against a target even when the satellite navigation system it uses has been disrupted by Russia's jamming techniques. The drone also has built-in terminal guidance, which Auterion claims offers it pinpoint accuracy during the final stage of its flight. It's thanks to this software that the Artemis will be usable by any country that's allied with Ukraine and the US, as Auterion CEO Lorenz Meyer points out. Software-driven autonomy is changing the nature of deterrence, Meyer says. Our Artemis entrant is designed for mass production and rapid deployment, enabling partner nations to field resilient autonomous strike capabilities at scale. Don't underestimate the importance of this software. A long-range UAV that can resist Russia's jamming is an extremely dangerous prospect for Putin. As Politico points out, Russia has been using GPS jamming at an increasing rate over the course of the Ukraine war. Often, this technology is used for hybrid warfare purposes, such as Russia's constant attacks on shipping and aircraft flying in NATO airspace. However, Russia has also installed GPS jammers in many of the facilities that it wants to protect from Ukraine's long-range drones. The idea is simple. Most drones use GPS to find their targets. When that GPS is jammed, the drone can't figure out where it's going and it flies off course. Artemis appears to have mitigated this problem for Ukraine. And when the US starts using the drone, it'll also know that it has a weapon that Russia can't jam. Now, there's an unexpected addendum to the GPS jamming issue. Ukraine, of course, uses similar jamming techniques to Russia in an effort to stop Russia's Shahed-type drones from scoring hits on their targets. As Business Insider revealed on October 16, this means that Ukraine's skies are becoming so crowded with its own GPS jammers that it can make it difficult for the country to work out how to launch its drones into Russian territory. As a pilot named Dmytro Zluktenko, who served with Ukraine's unmanned systems forces, told Business Insider, "We have to coordinate, saying when we're going to fly through the front line." There are a couple of interesting issues that arise here. When Ukraine shuts down its GPS jamming to send out its own drones, avenues for attack open up to Russia. Russia may never be able to time its long-range drone strikes to take advantage of these avenues, but there's always a chance of Russian drones arriving at the same time as Ukrainian drones leave, meaning Ukraine's jammers would be out of commission. The other problem, of course, is that active jamming means that Ukraine is limited in terms of where it can launch its drones. Both problems could be solved by Artemis, which appears to be just as capable of overcoming Ukraine's GPS jamming as it is of overcoming Russia's electronic warfare techniques. Skynode N will be huge for the Artemis drone. And who knows, it may be the sort of thing that Ukraine will be able to build into its own drones, which in turn could benefit the US. Artemis may end up being the trailblazer that enables Ukraine to build drones domestically that meet US requirements. Each country strengthens the other, all thanks to the software used by this initial drone. Now, Russia's Shahed types were mentioned a moment ago. As Defense Express notes in its report on the Artemis, Auterion has published a single image of its new drone that reveals it shares more than a few design similarities with the Shahed. The shape, in particular, makes it look a little like a Shahed 136. However, that shouldn't come as a surprise. The Shahed itself is based on the German DAR, the outlet says, and that's several decades old. This is a tried and tested design. However, the combined forces of Auterion and its Ukrainian partners have done far more than copy somebody else's homework. They tweaked the design so that it's better than ever. The Artemis has a nose-mounted camera, Defense Express reports, which will presumably send a real-time video feed to the Skynode N mission computer used to operate the drone. Perhaps this camera might even allow Artemis to serve as a long-range reconnaissance drone that gathers intelligence on prospective targets inside Russia. The drone also has additional antennas. Typically, these antennas allow a drone to communicate with its operator and vice versa. So it looks like Artemis may have a couple of backup antennas where Shahed doesn't. Finally, Defense Express says, the Artemis drone also uses an electric motor, which is uncommon in long-range drones. Auterion and its Ukrainian partners may have developed this engine so that Artemis is quieter than other long-range drones. So, Artemis is familiar, yet different. And that's not a bad thing. Familiarity allows for a drone to be more easily integrated into a country's arsenal. Here, Ukraine's influence on the design process may be apparent. As mentioned at the beginning of the video, the US drew from Ukraine's first-hand experience to develop Artemis. The final product seems to be a far more advanced Shahed equivalent that has some autonomous capabilities and is resistant to electronic warfare, Euromaidan press reports. Ukraine will be happy with that. The US will be delighted that it now has a long-range drone it can develop in-house that it knows it's going to be combat tested in Ukraine. The next step is scaling up toward mass-scale co-production of the drone, and Auterion seems to have that well in hand. Euromaidan press says that the company is already building several manufacturing lines in Ukraine, the US, and interestingly, Germany. Perhaps that's a hint that the Artemis will soon find its way into the arsenals of NATO's European members too. Having manufacturing lines outside Ukraine also means that Russia won't be able to stop the building of Artemis drones, even if it manages to discover and strike the Ukrainian manufacturer that's worked on the drone. Unless Russia wants to start a war with the US or Germany, it'll be forced to accept that both countries can provide this new drone to Ukraine if Ukraine can't build the drone itself. So it looks like all of the bases are covered. Artemis is here, and it's going to be unleashed en masse once production is put into place. So what does the development of this drone mean for the future? For Ukraine, the successful development of Artemis is a perfect example of the joint drone production operations that it's trying to start with as many external contractors as possible, Euromaidan press reports. This is a smart move by Ukraine. The country is using these joint development programs to further strengthen its ties to its Western allies, all while using itself as the testing ground for the products that come out of these relationships. Mikhailo Fedorov, who is Ukraine's Deputy Prime Minister for Innovation, Education, Science and Tech, and Minister of Digital Transformation, explained the country's approach during an appearance at September's Defense Tech Valley Expo. This is the innovation cycle, and here we're moving quite fast, Fedorov said. We sent a message to our partners who arrived today. If your products are not being tested in Ukraine today, then you will not be able to stay competitive in the defense market. The US has clearly heard that message. Several other nations have too. On October 15, the UK announced that it has shipped 85,000 drones to Ukraine, and it's invested around $730 to $760 million in 2025 to help Ukraine boost the production of drones domestically. The UK and Ukraine have also signed a technology sharing deal that will benefit the development of a new interceptor drone Ukraine can use to fend off Russia's long-range UAVs. Of course, the UK will also be able to build this drone when it's ready, meaning it can add the new UAV to its own stockpiles. The UK also worked alongside Latvia to create the International Drone Coalition with Ukraine. That coalition exists to help Ukraine develop and test new drones, all of which will likely also end up being used by the members of the coalition. On July 3rd, United 24 Media reported that this coalition now has 20 members, with Turkey and Belgium being the newest. What's being seen here is an attempt to standardize drone technology across NATO. Yes, Ukraine isn't a member of NATO, at least not yet, but pretty much every nation with which it works on these types of joint drone products is a NATO ally, and that means very bad things for Putin. Russia's leader appears to be thinking about a war with NATO should he succeed in Ukraine. Before these joint developments started to crop up, most of Ukraine's drones were being developed domestically with no real standardization. Now, it looks like a veritable arsenal of drones, each with its own purpose, is being built both for use in Ukraine right now and use by NATO in the future. The Artemis is just the latest in an increasingly long line. Soon, drones will be built to a defined NATO standard, much like many of the other weapons that the Defense Collective uses. The creation of Artemis also signals the further strengthening of the relationship between Ukraine and Auterion. The Artemis drone isn't the first time the two have worked together. Back in July, Auterion signed a contract with Ukraine to deliver 33,000 of its Skynode strike kits. That deal was worth $50 million. It also has the Pentagon's backing, which feeds into the point made earlier about Ukraine's increasing cooperation with the US defense industry. The earlier mention of how Ukraine might be able to incorporate the Skynode system used in the Artemis drone into its other drones is reinforced by the purchase of these kits, which seems to highlight it's doing just that. And then there's the US. As important as the development of the Artemis may prove to be for Ukraine, it will be just as important for the US. See, the US has a problem with its military. For as advanced as most of its hardware is, the US is a long way behind many other nations when it comes to drone development. Before the Ukraine war, that wasn't a problem. Drones were seen as useful, though not war-changing pieces of equipment. But Ukraine changed the face of the war with its use of drones, proving that they're essential when fighting against a country like Russia that uses ground-based attritional tactics. The US faced a dilemma. It had spent the previous decades pumping trillions of dollars into the next generations of aerial platforms, air defenses, and the like, but had severely underinvested in the one weapon that seemed to be proving the most useful in a war against Russia. CNN highlighted this issue in a September 15 article. Most American soldiers lack the know-how for fighting with unmanned systems, and while the US has excelled at building large, expensive weaponry, fighter jets, tanks, precision-guided missiles, it's in many ways unprepared to quickly produce large quantities of small, cheap systems like drones, the outlet said. And CNN isn't the only outlet pointing this out. On October 14, the War Zone reported that Lieutenant General Charles Costanza, who commands the V Corps, had made it clear that the US had a lot of catching up to do. "We're behind. I'll just be candid. I think we know we're behind," Costanza said during the Association of the US Army's annual symposium. "We've been talking about the counter-UAS, uncrewed aerial systems, and UAS capability for a better part of a decade, since really we watched the war in Armenia and Azerbaijan go on, and saw very much the beginning of the drone UAS capabilities. Watching and talking aren't the same thing as building and using. Ukraine has spent the better part of 4 years doing the latter two things. The US has been focused too much on the former two. Now, the time for watching and talking is over, because America is dealing with a problem today that it never thought it would face. The country's defense contractors are starting to play catch-up. Requests are being lodged in the thousands for Ukrainian drone data, especially footage showcasing successful strikes, CNN reports Fedorov is stating. Ukraine has a chance to leverage its drone innovation to ingratiate itself further with its Western partners, and it's taking advantage of that fact. The US, on the other hand, is approving the types of contracts that Auterion is signing with Ukraine because it knows that, for once, another country is ahead of it when it comes to military technology. As US Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth puts it, "Lethality will not be hindered by self-imposed restrictions, especially when it comes to harnessing technologies we invented but were slow to pursue," Hegseth says. "Drone technology is advancing so rapidly, our major risk is risk avoidance." Hegseth also says that he expects drone capabilities to be baked into the US military by 2026, which includes the development of the capability to conduct force-on-force drone wars. The Artemis drone could help the US develop that capability. And that drone would have been possible were it not for Ukraine cooperating with a US manufacturer to make that drone a reality. Now, it shouldn't come as a surprise that the US is rushing to catch up to Ukraine on the drone front. Ukraine has proven, many times over, that drones are the ticket for taking out far more powerful and expensive military hardware. It proved that point again when it used drones to obliterate a Russian mechanized assault that included the supposedly invincible T-90M tank. Find out more in our video, and remember to subscribe to the Military Show for more coverage of new developments in drone technology.